All right. Welcome to the Pig Daily, episode number 88. I am Pig, and today we're going to talk about StarCraft. What a big, fat surprise that is. Thanks for hanging out, guys who are watching live. You guys watching on YouTube as well. Thank you for tuning in. The patch just came out. It's big news. 3.8, the big whopper, the big, fat, juicy patch. Crazy balance changes. Nova mission packs came out today. A bunch of other cool stuff. So it's awesome. It's crazy. It's changed so many things. So let's dive straight into a couple of replays and let's start talking about a few of the key things for you guys to keep an eye out on when you are first hopping into this state of balance. So we're going to just start by watching a few of my replays. Now these are from the test map because it didn't actually come out until it's literally just come out on NA, the new balance. Haven't had a chance to play on it too much. But this is from the testing kind of queue, which they have, where it's almost identical. There are a few differences. So if you guys have been playing that testing ladder, a few things to keep in mind. Number one, Cyclones now have their range reduced by 2 down to 4 range in the current version, which has just come out with this patch. The big difference, though, is... I mean, that's huge, right? That's like a massive amount of their range reduced. However, you can get an upgrade on the tech lab of the factory, which will then give them +2 range to bring them back up. So unfortunately, the triple reactor build, which I was having fun with a little bit on the testing ladder, not going to be as viable because you do need to get a tech lab on at least one of those factories to get that upgrade to make those Cyclones nice and useful. Siege tanks are also going to be getting a 15 hit point buff from 160 to 175 hit points. And last but not least, we are also going to be seeing DT blink cost reduced. But it's such a nothing upgrade anyway. I shouldn't say nothing upgrade. It's going to be the nichest of the niche upgrades. It's like so damn niche. We're not going to see it very often. When we do see it, everyone's going to lose their minds and then the DTs are just going to die and everyone's going to go, oh, that wasn't that impressive. Who would have thought? Giving a very fragile unit, which can already be blinked by a warp prism, the ability to blink very late in the game at a huge cost. Not the most massive thing, it's not going to be game breaking. But I think the biggest changes really do all focus around Terran. Now, don't get me wrong, Zerg has some crazy buffs, and I'll talk about those later as well. But for now, let's focus on Terran, because I feel like this is one of the most important things, which is really... not just buffing things that are already in the game, but really bringing back a style which we haven't seen for a long time, and that is mech. Mech is this style we haven't really been seeing too much of. In TVT, it had a bit of a comeback recently. In TVZ, TY, and Innovation have been doing it recently. But, you know, beyond that, it hasn't really been doing too well. Now, what we're about to see, guys, is remember, these are the Cyclones with the bonus range, which normally you would have to get an upgrade to get. And that is why we're going to watch them absolutely destroy everything. Let's put those health bars on. Because I have to load this in an old version of StarCraft. It gets rid of my overlay and all my settings. And we see that the Cyclone here is a bloody beefcake. And of course, even though it doesn't do that much damage to non-armored units, it doesn't really die to them either. So it's just going to kind of be a massive pain in the ass. Of course, Cyclones now only cost 150 minerals. And 100 gas, so they're down 50 gas cost. They still do cost 3 supply, still take 32 seconds to build, but you can also build them out of a reactor, so much more accessible. And their attack animation, I just love this. Like, there's just something about this where I know every time someone loses to these missiles, they're gonna cry themselves to sleep. There is gonna be so much rage. It is gonna be fantastic. It's going to be beautiful. So. I don't know why, I just find it so comedic. Anyway, so this is me. I'm blue. You can tell because I'm the shit one. I'm playing against a Korean GM Terran here. We're both barcodey McBarcodes, which is obviously kind of lame. But let's talk a little bit about a few things for Terran players. When you're going mech now, well, first of all, wait a second. Let's address something here. I don't want to play mech. Bio is what I play StarCraft for. Bio is fun. It's action-packed. Mech is boring. Mech is slow. F you, David Kim and Blizzard. I hate you guys. I'm quitting this game. I've seen like a couple Reddit posts along that line, and I definitely kind of have a little bit of that same feeling of like, oh man, I really enjoy Bio. I love that fast-paced nature of Terran. And definitely it is not as powerful, whereas we're seeing big buffs for mech and Bio's kind of the same. Against Zerg, Baneling speed boost, this sort of stuff is kind of going to make that stronger. It's definitely going to be a little bit harder to make Bio work, or at least not quite as accessible. I think this is a good opportunity for me. I'm just kind of like, well, you know what? I've been meaning to learn mech for a while. I haven't learned it. I'm just going to have fun with it and enjoy it. I do think there will still be space for some Bio styles, especially marine tank styles, played a lot like Wings of Liberty. Because those tanks can't be lifted by medevacs anymore, you kind of move them forward and do that sort of stuff. But really, the main changes around mech, I think most of you guys are going to want to try out mech, have fun playing with mech. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So I just wanted to clarify that for the like 6 people watching who are like, fuck you, this isn't how to play Bio in this patch. I hate you. It's not my fault. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. So first of all, if you want to play mech, something a lot of players doing, grabbing their gases too early on their natural. You guys would know me. I'm obsessed with gases because I like people that manage their economies properly. I think I contracted that disease from Snoot. He talks about gases a lot, so I blame him. Anyways, basically, a lot of people just grabbing their gas too early, kind of building things in a really disorganized manner. Couple things to remember. Number one, cyclones don't really shoot up. Their lock-on kind of sucks. I call it the tickle cannon. You need to lock on like 4 or 5 of them to a single Oracle or Overlord if you want to actually kill it. So that's like, it's kind of like a token. We can kind of shoo off individual air units or shoot down individual drops when you've got a bunch of us together and you lock us all onto the one target. But that's about it. They're not good against Oracle harass when you've only got 1 or 2 or any of that sort of stuff. Second thing is, if you're playing a macro style, which you almost always are, unless you're doing like a rough style Hellbat tank timing, get your 3rd command center before you grab extra gases and extra factories. The number of players, including myself, who I see going up to like 4 factories, 4 gases, and armory, and then they've just got this like SCV waiting at their 3rd mineral line, and they're like, when can I put the command center down? And they realize like, wait, I just never have minerals. These gases really do take a lot of mining away from your minerals. So if we look here at this build order that our GM player is doing, you can see a pretty solid build order. He did open up with just a cyclone off no add-on or 2 cyclones. He's then swapped the reactor over. He's got his expansion down behind this, and he's just going straight for 3rd CC. And only after that 3rd CC are we going to see 2nd factory go down in about a few seconds. Tech lab on the barracks to help provide for that. And then as he gets the money, we're going to see that double gas drop on this natural. So that's going to be something which is very important for Terran players wanting to play mech. Let's also talk about the Cyclone as a unit. Now the Cyclone here, it's beefy. That's probably its main characteristic. A Cyclone costs exactly half of a Thor in both supply and cost. A Thor is 300, 200, a Cyclone is 150, 100. 3 supply versus 6 supply. So 2 Cyclones are basically a Thor. Now what you'll find is that 2 Cyclones have 360 life, whereas a Thor has 400 life. They have the same armor. So Cyclones are almost as meaty as Thors when it comes to just generally absorbing damage. What about their attacks? Well, obviously Thors are much better against anti-air in the new patch. They've got this great single target damage when you swap them into that high impact payload anti-air. And they've also got excuse me. They've also got a slight anti-air splash increase on their javelin missiles when they aren't in the high impact payload. And Thors also have +1 anti-air range on their anti-air attacks. So Thors are like much better anti-air, but the Cyclones really are the meaty unit, and especially what's very important with them is upgrades. If you ever intend to make a lot of Cyclones, you got to remember they don't really do that well versus non-armored units. So you're relying on them a lot as a meat shield, but it's a very expensive meat shield. Hellbats, on the other hand, 145 hit points once you morph them in. They are going to have 1 less armor, as opposed to 180 hit points, but it's 100 minerals versus 150 minerals and 100 gas. So the Hellbat is still the much more cost-efficient version of your tanking there. So, just realized I left my alerts on. Sorry about that, guys. I'll turn those off. So do keep in mind, Hellbats are still going to be much cheaper just for sitting in front of tanks, sitting in front of Thors, and generally just absorbing all the damage and kind of bullshit that your opponent can throw at you. Oop. Let's just put that on camera here while I save those settings. There we go. So yeah, upgrades are very important as well because you've got such a small damage point on the Cyclone. Look at that, only 3 damage to light units, and it attacks 10 times a second. So yes, it attacks like a machine gun, but you can imagine if your opponent has 1 armor, that goes down to 2 damage. If they've got 2 armor, it goes down to, down to 1 damage and so on. So the Cyclone, if you're ever down on attack upgrades versus armor upgrades, you're going to do crap all damage to non-armored units. On the other hand, if you're up in attack upgrades, I did a test where I had like +3 Cyclones and Thors, and only +1 armor, and they were both seeing who could kill a Thor faster, and 2 Cyclones with +3 could shred a +1 armor Thor in it's like 2.5 seconds, maybe less. It was ridiculous how fast. It was way faster than the Thor could do it, even though Thors have amazing anti-ground damage. So Cyclone's going to be fantastic versus armed units. It's going to be good as a meaty unit. I think their main role, though, is to punish your opponent's meaty unit. So in small numbers, in mech, if your Cyclones can actually get in range and focus their tanks, they will destroy them. If your opponent goes Roaches, build a lot of Cyclones and you're going to have a good day. Roaches just suck against Cyclones. Cyclones are kind of the Roach of Terran in that they're incredibly meaty, you can mass them now, and you can sometimes just A-move and just surprise your opponent and kill them because, they're just so strong that if your opponent doesn't have a certain amount of damage, they just get overwhelmed. But at the same time, because they are so much stronger against armor than other units, there is a little bit more thought involved with them. So you really do want to adjust your ratio against Zerg, for instance. You really don't want to be building that many unless they build those Roaches. If they just go Queen, Ling, Bane into Hydras, you really want to go for those Hellbat and tank focus. In TVT, how do you break this sort of army? Well, one thing we've already been seeing people experimenting with is going for that air superiority. Even though Thors, with that anti-air payload, we see here 38 damage, or 55 versus armor, they can kill Liberators pretty quickly. Where are those Liberators? I just want to check. Are Liberators armored? This is like one of those moments where I just have this mental blank. They are armored. Okay, good. But basically, Thors will be able to clear Liberators pretty reasonably fast. But especially if you get a good amount of Liberators and you just set up on top of the army. If they've only got a couple Thors out, it's mostly like tanks, Hellbat, Cyclones, then you can definitely take this down. In this case, we're going to see the power of these Cyclones whenever they get in range of armored units and just generally with some Hellbats in front. Look how fast these 0 armor siege tanks versus these +1 Cyclones are just going to die. The tanks just disappear so quickly. You'll find the most awkward thing about the Cyclones is between attacks is where they lose the most damage, whenever they have to change targets. So let's watch that one more time. Cyclones are most powerful when they can just sit in a concave and just dish out damage. So if your opponent's like funneling into you, so your Cyclones don't have to move between each attack, that's when they're most effective. If your opponent can, or if you're fighting Cyclones and you can force them to move around a lot, and constantly have to like overkill units and then change targets a lot, or constantly reposition a concave, it makes it much more awkward for the Cyclones to consistently deal that ridiculous machine gun damage output. So that's actually pretty damn important. Of course, in this case, we just saw some mech overwhelm me because I was a dumbass and was making too many Vikings and didn't cover the ground there. And I also had a lot of my tanks out of position because I just underestimated the ability for a mech army to jump on me that much faster. So just looking at this one last time, keep in mind, if you see Cyclones and Hellbats running at you, don't treat this like it's a slow siege tank push where you can move up right to the edge of its range and then siege up. We see here, I'm like, yeah, let's just siege up right in front of these guys. And it's like, no, actually, you need to really be shelling on these units immediately. Obviously, my micro is shit. There's 2 tanks that aren't sieged. They're sieging really late. But yeah, these Cyclones, like, they jump on top of your stuff and they can kill you pretty quickly. So, yeah. If you guys want to get some cheap, easy wins, just mass, like, Cyclones and Hellbats in a lot of games and a lot of matchups, and I'm sure you can do some bullshit. So that's about the end of this one. Just kind of going over a few points there. In terms of mech, making sure you don't screw up your gas ratio. Of course, making sure you actually understand the place of the Cyclone there. And that takes us into PVT, where Protoss, playing against Terran, is the main change-up. If you're playing PvZ, there are differences there. But PVT is the big one, because you're going to be playing against mech a lot more. You're going to be playing against Cyclones in the early game. And Cyclones, really difficult to deal with. Just going to have to log back into Battle.net in order to get the next replay open. But Cyclones in the early game, you're going to see a lot of people just derping, being like, yeah, build a reactor, run Cyclones at you, 2 Cyclones, another 2 Cyclones. And I'm going to see I know a lot of Protoss players are just going to die. So this is really especially not for the top level players out there, because I'm sure you guys have already figured this out. But for everyone else, Cyclones can't really shoot up. If you're playing against people rushing Cyclones on that, I really think Stargate openings are just incredible. There's going to be a lot of people out there doing really derpy mech openings for a while. Just make Stargate every game. Your Adept Shade Vision has gone down, so Oracle provides you much more reliable scouting information. And if your opponent opens Cyclones, you can just clear out their mineral line, because that's such a big investment. It's going to be very difficult for them. So, of course, Stalkers, not very good against the new Cyclones. They can kind of, if you dance with them a bit and use Pylon Overcharge and Adepts to shield your Cyclones, they can do okay. But you definitely don't want to just be fighting a Cyclone with a single Stalker in the middle of the open ground. So this is a really horrible replay. Unfortunately, I couldn't find really any good PvT replays. But we're going to see one here of someone doing an example of one of those really bad mech builds. And an Oracle just killing them. This really is just something to put up on the screen while I talk about this. So for Protoss, there aren't massive changes in this balance patch. A lot of Protoss players are pretty upset about this. People are kind of mad, and justifiably so to some extent. People want new toys. Zerg suddenly have Swarm Hosts that are way better. Banelings are much stronger with Baneling speed. Swarm Hosts are incredibly cheap. Terran get this brand new Cyclone. They get these tanks which deal way more damage. There's big changes for Terran and Zerg, but Protoss don't really get that. And a lot of Protoss players out there are really upset about this. However, I really do feel like, yeah, I think Zerg's a bit broken right now. That's just like my feeling. I haven't played on the new balance. We'll find out if that's true or not. That's my first inclination. Like, I think Zerg's pretty damn powerful, probably too strong right now. But we'll see how it works out. But what I do feel for Protoss is they definitely had the most options and kind of, maybe not the most play styles, but I think the most solid play styles. I think if you count like gimmicky all-ins and crazy attacks, Zerg still had the most variety in Legacy of the Void up to this point. But I think in terms of like more solid plays and just kind of the diverse amounts of harassment and aggression and different tech trees that work, I really think Protoss had the most. And I think you've still got all of those options available to you. So whether it's PvT, PvZ, I think just sticking to your same solid openings as you did before and really learning how to adapt to the Zerg and Terran builds is most important. While we're just here in this early game, let's talk a little bit about the dreaded Swarm Host. The Swarm Host is going to be coming in, and this kind of goes for Terran players as well. A lot of players just kind of sitting back, Swarm Host come up, throw Locust in from all angles for free. Protoss player or the Terran player just keeps taking free damage and dies. And they're not really sure how to deal with this. So for you guys out there, if you're dealing with Swarm Hosts, if you're struggling with them, the key is always map control and trying to just force the Locusts out early. Now, it can force a lot more APM from you. So say you've got Blink Stalkers or simply a mobile army of Chargelots, Archon, Immortal. You want to always have good map vision. And whenever you see Swarm Hosts coming up, or you want to kind of anticipate where the Swarm Hosts will come from, you want to move up to that area of the map and force them to throw those Locusts. As long as they're like a good distance from your base, you can force them to throw the Locusts, turn around, walk away, and those Locusts will disappear and do nothing. And remember, there is a massive cooldown on that Swarm Host Locust. So as long as you do that, you can really minimize the Zerg's ability to do that. So whenever a Zerg goes for Swarm Hosts, it becomes about map control. If you're ever in a position where like, I can't leave my base, you're probably already screwed up and you're probably already dead. The tickle cannon in motion, guys. Oh my god, sorry, we gotta go back and watch this bit of that replay. This is so funny. And I welcome you to the Cyclone's tickle cannon. 2 Cyclones locked onto an Oracle, not paying attention at all, barely takes hull damage. Amazing. Amazing gaming, boys. But yeah, basically with Swarm Hosts, that's one way of doing it. So that's a bit more high APM, right? That's pretty high level. If you're like, man, I can't always be in position for Swarm Hosts, I can't always see everything on the map. How the hell do I deal with them? Air units. If the Zerg doesn't have any air superiority with those Swarm Hosts, you can use a Void Ray, a Banshee, a couple Phoenixes. If you could also just drop a Medevac or 2 of Marine Marauder on top of them. And make sure you send some detection over in case they use Burrow. So if you're like, where'd these Locusts come from? Usually you can just drop a scan on the ground if you're Terran, or if you're a Protoss, just bring an Oracle or an Observer over, and usually it's pretty obvious where they've burrowed the Swarm Hosts. Every single time I've tried that, people have found my swarm hosts. So you guys should be able to as well. So yeah, swarm hosts are pretty good. But you can definitely deal with them, and it's all about map control. So if you're not used to dealing with them... Well, this guy was pretty intense micro there. GG's. So yeah, that's a big one with the swarm hosts. It's all about that map control. But what about dealing with cyclones and so on? I really do think Stargate openings are going to be pretty fantastic because they give you that scouting, they give you that ability to do damage, that pressure. So if you're playing a lot of players early on who are just like, oh, I'm just making cyclones, or I'm doing like a really bad mech build, remember, if they're not putting Widow Mines in their mineral line, if they're not building turrets, if they're not getting lots of Marines and sitting them around, they're still just as vulnerable as they were pre-balance. So don't kind of become irrational and just stop doing the same pressures which were working beforehand. You can still absolutely do those. And in PvT, once you're up against mech, I mean, a few key points. Personally, Blink Disruptor has always just been incredible for stopping mech. I mean, Disruptors just can zone out siege tanks and slow them down, pushing across the map forever. And from there, though, you don't have the easy option of just make Tempests and then roll over them, which you used to have. So it's one of those things where you guys are going to have to make a decision on, do you try to use the new Tempest stun ability and just like come in with your Tempests and like cast stun all over the Terran army, and at the very least that's going to force them to dodge and siege up, which is pretty cool. So maybe going like 3 to 5 Tempests against a mech army would help a lot, and then like your Immortals and Stalkers and Disruptors just come in from every side. Alternatively, you're going to want to be going Carriers, which are still a fantastic unit. So if it goes late game against mech, Carriers, now with the Interceptors only costing 5 minerals a pop, is going to be amazing. Of course, you got to watch out for splash damage. Liberator's going to still do very well against Interceptors. The new Thor Splash has a 20% bonus to its AoE. So that's something to watch out for as well. So there's a few little things for you to watch out for as a Protoss player. But for the most part, PvT is very similar. PvZ is a lot about getting rid of those swarm hosts. And I guess also what you've got to pay attention to while we open up into the next replay, we're going to talk about Zerg a little bit. But what about PvZ while we go and open that up? So, PvZ. Besides you know what we talked about with Swarmos, what really has changed? Banelings have a little bit more hit points with the Bane speed upgrade. Okay, fair enough. Doesn't really change the way you deal with it. I just think Storm becomes more important in PvZ. The big thing that I've noticed is, I mean, you can still play Disruptors if you're like a big Disruptor player, but I always found Disruptors very awkward to play against Ling Bane, so unless you're one of those rare beasts who's actually comfortable with that, I would definitely say, maybe don't do that. But definitely Storm. So why is Storm great? Because Banelings are buffed, but also Hydras are buffed for Zerg. So Hydras now have +1 range, and they get their move speed bonus from the move speed upgrade on creep, which previously they didn't. If you got the upgrade, all it did was increase their move speed off creep to what it is on creep. So there's no change on creep, but now Hydralisks on creep, it's like a Marine with 2 extra range permanently stimmed when they're on creep. Like, Hydralisks are ridiculous on creep. I feel like they can almost beat late game armies now. Like, because you can have them so spread, they can deal their damage from so far. And they're such a sort of glass cannon unit. They always have been, right? Very fragile, but huge damage. Now that they can just form a concave like that, they can wrap around the opponent's force and deal that damage there. They're pretty incredible. So this is why I think Storm is more important than ever, because Storm's still good against Banelings, even though they've got a bit more hit points. It does take a bit longer to kill them. And Hydras, as always, you've just got to get on top of them and kill those fuckers as fast as possible. So I really do love just the classic Charge Lot Immortal Archon, but more focused on Storm than Archons now, and lots of Charge Lot Warp-ins as always, because Hydras, you know, they're good when they're all together like that. If they're split out, just a few Hydras on their own, Zealots get on top of that and they can just tear it apart. So definitely something where you just want to be going for Storm most of the time, in my opinion, against Zerg and really totaling up. Of course, that kind of covers some of those Protoss options. Let's talk a little bit about ZVT here, as we've got a ZVT replay open. And keep in mind, Cyclones are being nerfed, so you won't have to deal with the same bullshit, which I'm going to be showing in this replay. Actually, we'll just fast forward straight to the bullshit, and then we'll go back and talk about it. because there will still be very similar builds. As I mentioned at the start of the show, I was doing a 3-reactor build just for the lulls, where I was just massing Hellions and Cyclones on 2 base and just going as hard as I could. And even when players scouted it, they would just underestimate the strength of it. We see here a 2-reactor build, so not quite as ridiculous as my 3-reactor build, but still going to be a pretty powerful attack, but with actually a decently timed 3rd CC behind it, I think. Whereas mine was a 3-gas build. So yeah, he's just gonna pump out Cyclones, pump out Hellions. Actually gonna make an armory as well this game, and just gonna come YOLO across that map. So yeah, in the early game, Roaches just suck against Cyclones. That's something which is just generally a rule. I think Roaches are still a good unit to defend Adepts early on against Protoss. Ravagers can still be very useful against Protoss, as they could before. But really, against Cyclones, you do not want Roaches. That's just so much damage. Just to put it in perspective, every second that's 50 damage from the Tornado Blaster. So if you put a Cyclone up against a Roach, unupgraded, keep in mind it's going to be 40 damage because of the armor. It's going to take about 4.2 seconds exactly for the Cyclone to kill the Roach. A Roach in that time will be able to attack 3 times, which means it will do 48 damage. So a Cyclone versus a Roach, the Roach will take about about 40 hit points off the Cyclone. The Cyclone will be at like 2/3 life, even more than that, and the Roach will be dead. So Roaches are just not a good unit versus Cyclones. And this does put you in a bit of a conundrum when they're combined with Hellions, right? Because you don't really want to make Ling Bane against Hellions and Hellbats. This is why Queens really are the answer. Hey, who would have thought, right? Queens are the answer to playing against Terran and Legacy of the Void? Shit, the knowledge bombs here. Honestly, though, Queens really are the most important thing. You can see here in this game, for instance, I don't have a lot of transfuse energy spread across my Queens because I built a lot of my extra Queens a little bit late. And I don't have a Baneling Nest or anything like that for safety. I've only got like, what, 5, 6 Queens here at the front. And where's the transfuse energy at, man? They're all like, so many of them in the 40s. And they're all a little bit too clumped, and I don't have creep on this little bit of ground as well. I've only got a couple Zerglings as well. Zerglings should have already flanked in from behind. As always, you want to kind of spread around these attacks, come in from all sides and try to wrap it up. Just a few Queens here, and because these are such tanky units, it's like a very slow-paced battle. Queens versus Hellions and Cyclones, but definitely one you can hang on against. And the later they hit, with more and more Cyclones and Hellbats, obviously Queens and Zerglings will scale worse and worse, but that's when you start to have Banelings in the mix as well. This sort of timing that he hit, about 5 minutes, definitely can defend without Banelings. You just always want to be going for 9 or 10 Queens. So against Terran especially, one of the big adjustments I know a lot of players are going to need to be making is just always doing a very Queen-heavy build. Let's talk about a good example. This is a poorly executed version, but we can talk about the fundamentals of it. Basically, you still want to get Zergling speed as per normal, but you really do want to be following a rule of 1 gas. Not necessarily exactly the same as my rule of 1 gas build, which I've been talking about and telling people to use forever, but something where you do want to usually pull off gas after your Ling speed starts, or at most keep mining from only that gas geyser and no other gas geyser, but you really don't want to be taking a fast second gas. You want to just be focusing on getting up your 3 base economy if you're doing a solid macro build, and just pumping Queens. So there's a 3rd Queen that starts pretty early, creep spread starts pretty early. And usually around the time you saturate 2 mineral lines, when you're about 45, 50 supply is when you want to start massing up more and more Queens. We can see I'm already starting an extra Queen in the main. I'm starting another Queen here from the natural, and as soon as my 3rd starts, I'm starting another Queen. So you want to be massing these Queens out. And of course, if you ever scout your opponent just building lots of Cyclones and Hellions, which I did see here, and I should have been paying attention to, you should just be non-stop Queens. You can always add a Spine Crawler if you want. While Spine Crawlers die pretty quickly to Cyclones, because a Spine Crawler has 2 armor, it will actually reduce the damage down to the pretty much the verse light damage for the Cyclones. So Spines, especially with Transfuses, will still do okay. But generally speaking, you just add a Baneling Nest if you see them massing up these factory units. Make a lot of Queens. Don't be afraid to overcommit to those Queens. If your opponent ever wants to build this many units, I know a lot of players are going to get stuck in that mode whenever New Balance comes out, where they just go, this is broken, this is unfair, how do I stop this? And it's all about understanding how your opponent's build works. So for the Zerg players out there, who knows, maybe Protoss players start dying to Cyclone Hellion attacks as well. Check out this build. What is the Terran's transition from here? It's nothing. He doesn't have a third CC on the way. He doesn't have upgrades. Armory's just finished. He's only got 2 factories. He's got no tech labs. Can't even build siege tanks behind this. There is no transition off this. This is a huge attack. It's not all in, but it really needs to do absolutely massive damage. So against this sort of attack, you don't need to have a lair and evo chambers and 3 fully mining mineral lands. You can just have an advantage in one of those areas. Just having a third base with a couple drones on it and a lair is enough of an advantage. You could have completely skipped upgrades, or you could have just gone upgrades and a couple drones on your third, skip the lair, delay that. Always just cutting out a few things to compensate for the fact that your opponent's doing a very aggressive build is going to allow you to deal with all these crazy new attacks which people are coming out with. So the new balance really is going to be a time of these new attacks. Obviously, if someone wants to do this sort of attack, they'll need a tech lab on one of those factories. So it would probably hit a little bit later because they'd need to get that range upgrade. But it's one of those things where you guys just need to make sure you're actually studying your opponent's build orders, trying to understand them. People get used to the status quo in StarCraft. They get used to this build, there's this aggressive build, there's this aggressive build. I know how to stop this one with this one with that, and the other one with the other. And then whenever things change, players really get angry and freak out because suddenly they're thrown back into a point where they don't fully understand what's going on in the game. And people hate not knowing what's going on in the game. People get really mad. People really hate that shit. So yeah, basically people just kind of get angry and irrational, and I do the same thing. We all do. So just kind of a heads up to all you guys out there. Try to focus on actually watch the replay. Think about how your opponent's build works. What are they sacrificing to hit such a hard timing? How can you identify it? In this case, it's that classic situation of no third CC, no eBays, no double armory, 2 reactors, which are both, you know, signs of very, very obvious specific build. They signify literally just this build. And yeah, you're just like, alright, cool. I understand now. Next time I'm going to stop at X drone count, build units then, build more queens, build Baneling Nest, and I will be fine. So there's going to be a lot of adjusting, a lot of adapting, and a lot of getting used to all the new crazy shenanigans that people are going to be throwing your way. So this was like a pretty broad overview of a few of the key things for each race that you've got to think about. A lot of different things I talked about, swarm hosts and how to deal with them, how to deal with cyclones. There's every race, including Terran, because cyclones are this kind of weird new unit. And, you know, I do feel like they're going to induce the most rage because people get so angry at those kind of meaty A-movie units. But really, it's just going to be a thing where practice will make perfect. We'll all figure it out, and it should be amazing. By the way, guys, I do want to say a massive thank you to Naruto, who has just sent me a whole bunch of Home Story Cup replays. So I will be able to look at some of those over the coming days as well. Can't wait to talk about some patience blinks. For you guys who have been keen for ICYFAR, ICYFAR will be restarting next week. So ICYFAR is I Cast Your Freaking Awesome Replays. It's a show similar to Day 9's Fun Day Monday. Normally there's a challenge. This one's going to be really friggin' simple. Show me new builds. Show me awesome, creative things. I want to see swarm hosts. I want to see cyclones. I want to see new mech. I want to see Protoss players using Tempests, or just generally, even Protoss players just shutting down the new strategies. Even that, it could be as simple as you just like wrecking a cyclone timing. I just want to see your replays that show off the new balance, show off cool situations and cool games. So send me through those replays. That is the ICYFAR topic for tomorrow. Have we got... Oh, Eon Blue, as always, is in chat. If you could be a baller and edit the ICYFAR command, that would be amazing, just to kind of put that info in there. But yeah, send in your replays, of course, as always, to Eon Blue at... I can't even remember the email off the top of my head. It's okay. It's down in the YouTube description. It'll be posted in Twitch chat in just a moment as well. But that's all for now, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. If you are on Twitch, don't go anywhere. I will be hopping into the ladder in just a moment. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll be back tomorrow with another daily. That's all for now. Don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a walrus, and of course, punch a cactus to the moon. I'll catch you guys next time. Goodbye and good night. Ciao. Did you say yes or no to the Baneling Nest in addition to the Queens to defend the Cyclone Hellbat mech? Yeah, I really think the Baneling Nest is good in the early game, Shamala Phantom, because Roach Warren's just useless. So, like, you don't always need a baneling nest, because, like, if your opponent's just going 3cc and building a few Hellions for map control, you can just defend with Queens and Lings. But if your opponent's like, I have 2 factories popping out Cyclones and Hellions, it's like, make a baneling nest, because you're going to need them to help back up exactly what you're doing there. So, yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Shamala. Shamala Phantom. And I will very quickly cut up today's VOD, guys, and throw that straight onto YouTube. It'll take me about 2 minutes. I've actually got almost everything completely ready for this. Just got to throw my tags up real quick. So apparently my my dashboard information didn't update, which is